My name is Daniel Kilov, and I am a memory athlete. I was, in fact, the silver medalist at the 2011 and 2012 Australian Memory Championships, and my national record is for memorising the order of 115 abstract images. I've spent the last 3 years learning about the human memory by studying the methods and techniques of some of the world's most impressive mental athletes. I've seen some remarkable things in that time, including a man who memorised the entire Sydney Yellow Pages. Yeah. And I've learned to do some things myself, which previously I would have thought impossible. I can now memorise the order of over 120 random digits in only 5 minutes, and I can memorise the order of a shuffled deck of cards in similar time. Now, over the next 16 minutes, I'd like to share with you some of what I've learnt. Before I start, however, who here has never heard of the Australian Memory Championships, or perhaps didn't even know that remembering things could be a sport? Just raise your hands. Most of you? That's cool. You I know have. Well, for those of you who've never seen a memory competition in the flesh, don't worry. They're not exactly spectator events. One thing which is very exciting about these competitions, however, is that the competitors are capable of learning huge volumes of information at incredible speeds. The world record, for instance, for memorising the order of a shuffled deck of cards is 21.19 seconds. The world record for memorising binary digits is a staggering 1,080 binary digits. 1,080 ones and zeros memorised perfectly, not a single error, and in only 5 minutes. And these records get broken every year. But memory athletes are not savants, and they're not superheroes. In fact, there's nothing particularly special about them at all. Rather, they just use a simple set and a very small set of techniques to learn whatever they want at very, very high speeds. The lesson of the memory athletes is that we actually all have potentially phenomenal memories. We just have to learn how to use them. And so today I have 2 related aims. My first goal is to transform the way you think about the act of remembering. I'm going to share with you some of the techniques used by memory athletes in competition, and in doing so I hope to convince you that our memories are not static snapshots that we pull up only when we need them, but that they constantly enliven and enrich our perception of the world in a way that is deeply human. By this, I mean to suggest that we shouldn't always be comfortable relegating the task of remembering things to our smartphones or search engines. My second goal is to convince you that in light of this revised view of memory, the best place for these techniques is not memory competitions, but our workplaces and in our classrooms. I will argue that our schools should teach students how to furnish their minds full of memories that will enhance both their critical thinking and their creativity. To begin with, I'd like you to cast your minds back to the last time that you guys had to memorise material, either in the workplace or perhaps at school. If your school experience was anything like mine, chances are this involved a lot of repetition. A lot of rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, a kind of dull, almost mindless parroting. Ironically, this is probably among the least effective ways of memorising information. What memory athletes know that allow them to memorise all the things that they do at such high speeds is that our memories work best when we approach them with a sense of playfulness. The process of memorising is as much an exercise in creativity as it is in fidelity. And the best way to understand this, of course, like anything, is to actually give it a go, is to experience it. And so what I'd like to do now is give you all a crash course in the principles of effective remembering. I'm going to turn everyone in this audience into a memory athlete. And I expect to see you at the next competition as well. I want to share with you the 3 principles that I believe underlie all the techniques used by memory athletes at competition. These 3 principles are mindfulness, visualization, and organization. The first principle is mindfulness. Now, it might seem so obvious as to not be worth mentioning, but if you want to remember something, you have to be paying attention to it. And this means learning what it feels like to be attentive so that you can get better at recognizing when you're not. The next two steps, those of creating mental visualizations and organization, these go hand in hand. We all have naturally fantastic memories for certain kinds of tasks. Everyone here, I imagine, can close their eyes and mentally navigate their own homes, probably also the homes of many of your friends, close family. And this is basically because our brains are primed for this kind of learning. The key then to effective memorizing is to transform things in code information with which we normally struggle into a more brain-friendly form. And an easy way to do this is to visualize a story involving the things you want to remember. And the more energetic and creative and colourful this story is, the easier it'll be to recall later. So I'd like now to run through an example. I'd like you to close your eyes, and as I tell you the following stories, I'd like you to create as vivid a mental pictures as you can. The more energetic, the more funny, the more surprising, the more fun these images are, the better they'll work. Together we're going to learn some simple Spanish words, and to any Spanish speakers in the audience, I apologize in advance for my terrible pronunciation. Okay, the Spanish word for shrimp is gamba. Now to remember this, I'd like you to visualize a very large shrimp, larger than any shrimp you've seen before, at least as big as a cat, but even bigger. And I'd like you to imagine that this shrimp is wearing 5 pairs of shiny black gumboots. And he's dancing around in his gumboots. Gumboots sounds like the Spanish word gamba, and so this is going to be our mnemonic. The next word we're going to learn is the Spanish word for rice, which is arroz. Arroz sounds like arrows, and so to remember this, I'd like you to imagine a line of archers pulling back on their drawstrings and letting loose a volley of arrows that go flying through the air and crash down in your bowl of rice. And really engage all your senses when you create these mental images. Imagine the steam rising from the bowl of rice. Maybe you can smell it, maybe even taste it. Imagine the individual grains flying everywhere as the arrows collide with your meal. The next word we're going to learn is the Spanish word for cat, which is gato. To imagine this, I'd like you to visualize a really fluffy cat. Maybe you'll even trying to play the guitar. Maybe you'll even imagine its claws twanging discordantly against the strings. And finally, to remember that the Spanish word for milk is leche, I'd like you to imagine a pitcher of milk and swimming around inside, doing laps, maybe doing a bit of backstroke, are big, black, slimy leeches. If it's disgusting, if it makes your skin crawl, then you know you're going to remember it. Okay, so now to give you all a quick test. I'm going to provide either the Spanish word or its English translation, and I want you to pay attention to how quickly and easily your mind offers up the appropriate mental image. Do you remember what gamba means? Fantastic. How about the Spanish word for milk? Beautiful. The Spanish word for cat? And finally, can you remember the Spanish word, the meaning of the Spanish word arroz? Yeah, great. So most of you can do this, and most of you can do it very easily. Now, we went over these words only once. There was no repetition. And the stories that we made up weren't mindless, but were opportunities for us to flex our imaginative muscles. Using this technique, which you've just learnt now, with which you've had no prior experience, I imagine you're probably outperforming yourself using the rote methods that you probably spent 12 years practicing at school. And of course, if you can learn 4 words in this manner, there's nothing preventing you from learning 4 more, or 40, or 400. In fact, Bruce Balmer, a competitor at the first World Memory Championships, used this technique, or one very much like it, to learn 2,000 foreign words in a single day. A lot of the metaphors we use when we talk about our memories, such as filing cabinets or photographs or computer hard drives, are really quite misguided. They're really not quite appropriate. Our memories are not perfect reproductions of past events that we pull up like files on a computer. only when we need them. Rather, our perception of the world is constantly coloured by the things we think, believe, and know, all of which resides in our memories. As was discussed in the last talk, there is no clear line between remembering and creating. Cultivating a better memory, then, is not merely about storage or efficiency. In this respect, our external recording technologies, our artificial memories, are either already superior to our biological ones or they will be someday soon. So I think it's okay to leave the task of remembering phone numbers or shopping lists and other trivial things to our favourite technological devices. But as I'll discuss in a minute, our most human capacities, those of reason, of analysis, of creative genius, these all depend crucially on memory. Research has shown, for instance, that it's facts stored in memory rather than innate ability or IQ that accounts for the mental powers of high-level chess players. In 1946, a Dutch psychologist named Adrian de Groot conducted an experiment to determine the source of skill of high-level chess players. The experiment involved showing players of various levels of skill different configurations of board from actual, although unfamiliar, high-level chess games. The participants were then asked to reconstruct the boards from memory. The results were astonishing. Chess experts, masters and grandmasters, were able to reconstruct the boards almost perfectly. Novices, on the other hand, could only recall the position of about a third of the pieces. The reason for this is that the chess experts saw the boards in a completely different way. Their vast memories of previous chess games meant that the configurations of the board, of the pieces on the boards all had meaning. The superior memory of the ability of the chess experts was not just a byproduct of their expertise, it was the essence of their expertise. Now, chess is usually thought of as a game of pure reasoning or abstract strategy. But in actual fact, the source of skill of expert players is what they remember about the game, and the way that those memories influence their perceptions of the board in front of them. Similar experiments have been done across a range of fields, always with similar results. Now, if it is remembered facts, rather than abstract reasoning skills or innate talent, that gives birth to phenomenal performance across a variety of fields, then the case for training our memories using the techniques and methods of memory athletes is all the stronger. We don't have to have been born geniuses to develop the kinds of memories that would allow us to learn all the things we ever wanted but never thought we could. And yet, memory has a bit of a bad reputation today, particularly in modern classrooms. Schools today de-emphasise the learning of facts and instead aim to develop students' capacity for critical analysis and the ability to look things up in books or on the internet. As I've discussed, however, this aim is out of step with the science of expertise. The ability to retrieve information, to analyse it, to play with it. This requires having that information at your fingertips, and that requires having it in memory. As a consequence, I'd now like to suggest that the techniques of the art of memory, the techniques used by memory athletes, represent a potential revolution in education. I was going to talk a little bit about the history of these techniques because they go back a really long way. They're over 2,000 years old, they were invented by the ancient Greeks, and really practiced universally by thinkers from the ancient world all the way up into the Renaissance. It's really only very recently that we've come to think of memory as something which is which numbs the mind rather than enriches it. But I'm running out of time. I'm just going to skip forward a bit because I'd like to talk a little bit about the way in which I think modern classrooms and modern workplaces could benefit from this ancient art. The first is the way in which the art of memory transforms our relationship to learning, to make it more fun and more efficient. And the second is the way that the art of memory makes educational performance a matter of merit, rather than the good luck of having been born with good genes or the fortune of being sent to a good school. Who here, for instance, has ever wished that they could learn another language, but been put off by the sheer volume of learning required, or the expectation of hours of painful effort involved in acquiring new vocabulary? Show of hands? Yeah, okay, almost everyone here. How then might your relationship to the task change if you knew you could pick up a language in a matter of months rather than years, as some memory athletes have done? I imagine your attitude would change too if you knew that the task of learning was not going to be boring, but would be an opportunity for the kind of mental playfulness that we experienced when we learnt those Spanish words earlier in the talk. At its core, the art of memory is about transforming the mundane into the memorable. It's about taking information which is perhaps less interesting to us or less easily remembered, such as scientific names, statistics, historical dates, particular quotes, and then transforming them, changing them into creative, colourful stories that contain exactly the kinds of things that do interest us. The techniques of the art of memory give us the tools we need to take control of our own learning. We could equip an entire generation of students with tools that would be invaluable to them throughout their educational and then subsequently professional careers. Another way that the techniques of the art of memory could change our schools and workplaces is because they're available to everyone. You don't need fancy equipment, and you don't have to have been born with an astronomical IQ. After all, some people are born with really good memories, aren't they? I mean, we've all met people like this. These are the people who effortlessly devoured course notes at universities, who seem to know absolutely everyone but never ever forget anyone's name. I was not one of these people. I was definitely not one of these people. But even the most naturally talented individuals could never memorize at the volumes and speeds that I can and that you could with the aid of the techniques of the art of memory. When it comes to the art of memory, the person who can remember the most and learn the fastest is the person who is the most prepared and most practiced, not the one blessed with the highest IQ or the best natural memory. There is another aspect as well, I think, in which the art of memory could act as an educational equaliser. Many modern educational programs require expensive new equipment or technology, and consequently, some of these tools may only be available to wealthier schools. The art of memory, however, was invented in an age that predates even pens and pencils and paper as we know it. It can be taught incredibly quickly. It was only 6 months after I started training that I competed in my first memory championship. As was mentioned, I was the silver medalist and I set a national record. These techniques could be taught incredibly fast and don't require any special equipment. I believe we are all mental athletes. In a competitive world, we all need to be able to remember more, be more creative, innovative, and focused. In this sense, the techniques used in memory competition should be available to everyone. We stand to gain much by bringing this ancient art of mental training into our modern world. You are all now on your way to becoming mental athletes, and I hope you use these principles and techniques to learn all the things that you ever wanted, but maybe until now, never thought you could. Thank you.